Witnessed my best friend kill someone in cold blood. At 28, I've always considered my best friend, Sarah, 27, to be like a sister to me. We had been friends since we were kids, practically growing up together through thick and thin. We shared everything with each other, from our deepest fears to our wildest dreams. But nothing could have prepared me for the day when I witnessed Sarah commit a heinous act that would change our lives forever. It all started on a seemingly ordinary Saturday afternoon. Sarah had invited me over to her apartment for a movie night, something we did regularly to unwind and catch up on each other's lives. As I walked through the door, I noticed that Sarah was unusually quiet and on edge. She barely made eye contact with me and seemed lost in her own thoughts. I brushed it off as just a bad day and suggested we start the movie to take her mind off things. But as the movie played on, Sarah's behavior became more erratic. She kept fidgeting in her seat, her eyes darting around the room as if she was expecting something or someone to show up at any moment. I finally couldn't take it anymore and asked her what was wrong. That's when she dropped the bombshell on me. She had got involved with a dangerous group of people who were pressuring her to do things she knew were wrong. She didn't go into details, but the fear in her eyes was enough to make my heart sink. I tried to reason with her, to make her see that whatever it wasn't worth putting herself in harm's way. But Sarah was adamant that she had no choice but to follow through with their demands. She pleaded with me to understand and promised that she would find a way to make things right eventually. I left that night feeling helpless and scared for Sarah. I couldn't bear the thought of my best friend getting mixed up in something so dangerous and destructive. I tossed and turned in bed, unable to shake the feeling of dread that had settled in the pit of my stomach. Next few days passed in a blur as I grappled with the weight of Sarah's secret. I didn't know who to turn to or what to do to help her. I tried reaching out to her, but she had become distant and evasive, avoiding my calls and messages altogether. Just when I was about to lose hope, Sarah showed up at my doorstep unannounced one evening. She looked more frazzled and worn out than ever, her eyes sunken and red from lack of sleep. She told me she needed my help, that she had made a terrible mistake that she couldn't undo. I listened in horror as she recounted the events of that fateful night. She had been coerced by the group to carry out a hit on a rival gang member, a man she had never met before. Sarah had been promised that it was a necessary measure to secure their trust and loyalty, but deep down, she knew it was wrong. Tears streamed down her face as she begged me to help her hide the evidence and protect her from the consequences of her actions. I was torn between my loyalty to my best friend and my moral compass, screaming at me to do the right thing. As the reality of what Sarah had done sunk in, a sense of dread washed over me. I couldn't ignore the gravity of the situation we were in, and I knew that my decision would have far-reaching consequences for both of us. In the end, I made a choice that would haunt me for the rest of my days. I agreed to help Sarah cover up the crime, to erase all traces of her involvement and shield her from the law. It was a decision made out of love and loyalty, but also one that would lead us down a path of darkness and despair. As we worked tirelessly to clean up the mess Sarah had made, the weight of our actions became too much to bear. I could see the toll it was taking on her, the guilt and shame eating away at her soul. And yet, despite everything, she refused to turn herself in or seek redemption for her sins. Our friendship, once unbreakable, had now become strained and fragile. We tiptoed around each other, avoiding the elephant in the room that threatened to tear us apart. I could feel the walls closing in on us, suffocating us with the weight of our shared secret. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, a knock on the door shattered the fragile peace we had managed to build. It was the police, armed with evidence that tied Sarah to the murder she had committed. My heart sank as I realized that our worst fears had come true. As Sarah was taken away in handcuffs, I stood there frozen in shock and disbelief. How had it come to this? How had I let my best friend spiral out of control, to the point where she was now facing life behind bars? I was left with a gaping hole in my heart, a soul-crushing emptiness that no amount of regret or guilt could fill. I was angry at Sarah for dragging me into her mess, for putting me in a position where I had to choose between loyalty and morality. But deep down, I knew that I was just as complicit in her downfall. I had enabled her, I had turned a blind eye to the warning signs, and now I was left to pick up the shattered pieces of our shattered friendship. As I sat alone in the darkness of my apartment, the weight of my choices crushing me from all sides, I couldn't help but wonder, am I the asshole? And as the question echoed in my mind, I knew that the answer was a resounding yes. Update. The days that followed Sarah's arrest, my mind was consumed with guilt and regret. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had failed her as a friend, that I had let her down when she needed me the most. The weight of her impending trial and potential sentence loomed over me, a constant reminder of the choices we had made and the consequences we now faced. I visited Sarah in prison, trying to make sense of what had driven her to commit such a heinous act. She looked like a shell of her former self, hollow-eyed and broken, a mere shadow of the vibrant and caring person I had once known. I wanted to scream at her, to demand answers and explanations for her actions, but all I felt was a deep sense of sadness and helplessness. As the trial date approached, I found myself torn between standing by Sarah's side and distancing myself from the darkness that had consumed her. The prosecution presented damning evidence against her, painting a grim picture of a cold-blooded killer who had acted without remorse. I couldn't bring myself to believe that the person I had grown up with was capable of such brutality, and yet the facts spoke for themselves. In the end, Sarah was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge's words rang hollow in my ears as I watched her being led away, the weight of her crimes finally catching up to her. I knew that she deserved to face the consequences of her actions, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had played a part in her downfall. Conclusion. I sit here, alone in the aftermath of Sarah's trial. I can't help but feel a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, regret. Our friendship, once the cornerstone of my existence, now lay in ruins, shattered beyond repair by the choices we had made. I couldn't help but hate her for dragging me into her mess, for forcing me to confront the darker side of human nature that I had so desperately tried to avoid. Yet, as much as I wanted to distance myself from her and the memories of what we had done, I couldn't escape the nagging feeling that I was just as culpable in her downfall. I had enabled her, I had turned a blind eye to the warning signs, and now I had to face the consequences of our shared actions. In the end, Sarah and I would go our separate ways, forever scarred by the choices we had made and the price we had paid. Our friendship, once a source of joy and comfort, now served as a painful reminder of the darkness that lurked within us all. As I reflect on the events that transpired, I can't help but wonder, did I do the right thing by standing by Sarah's side, even as she spiraled out of control? Or should I have turned her in, faced the truth head-on, and spared myself the heartache and guilt that now consumed me? In the end, there are no easy answers, no clear-cut resolutions. Our story is one of betrayal and redemption, of love and loss, of loyalty and deceit. And as I walk away from the wreckage of our friendship, I know that both of us will carry the scars of that fateful night for the rest of our days. And in the end, we will both be left hating each other for the choices we made and the consequences we faced. Was this person in the wrong? Comment down below and make sure to like and subscribe.